Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for a discussion about how private investigators can conduct precise and comprehensive due diligence, verify identities, and mitigate risk for organizations of all sizes. Our LexisNexis Risk Solutions speakers are Dan Phelan and Camilla Yelitz. Dan's expertise is in anti-money laundering, anti-bribery and corruption, BSA and USA Patriot Act compliance, as well as identity management. He has been with LexisNexis Risk Solutions for over 10 years and is instrumental in bridging the communication gap between business and information technology contacts. Camilla is originally from the UK and served as a police officer for the Metropolitan Police Service in London before transitioning to AML governance. Camilla has built and managed AML training programs and OFAC programs for large financial institutions. She has led both large-scale remediation projects, audits, and multiple regulatory agency examinations to ensure compliance with program elements. I will now turn the discussion over to Dan. Dan, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, everybody. This is Dan Phelan speaking. I thought I would start with a brief introduction of LexisNexis as a whole, and then we'll get into the solutions which we're going to be discussing today. So many of you probably know LexisNexis, especially on the legal research side. That name's been around for a long time. We work for LexisNexis Risk Solutions, which also accesses the deep data store of Lexis data, but we provide solutions more towards the risk use case. And so when we look at the LexisNexis company as a whole, we maintain over 6 petabytes of content comprising billions of public and proprietary records. We have over 13,000 sources of information, and we're constantly compiling and refreshing and maintaining that data. We've also created our own technology we call our HPCC system for processing through that huge piece of data. And so when we look at the HPCC system, we can process over 70 million transactions per hour. And then the next bullet here, the link ID, or LexID, sorry, is very important technology. When you have so many sources of data, you're going to find different information. Picture if you have John David Doe, and John uses his middle name in some scenarios and his first name in more formal scenarios. So you might have records from Florida for John Doe, and then you might have David Doe showing up in New Jersey, and then John D. Doe showing up in, say, Massachusetts. So the LexID technology allows us to take all these different sources of data and say, okay, we see similar information here. We know this is the same person or business, and pin them together, pinning technology as they call it. And that way our system will instantaneously pull up all the information for the individual business which you're looking at from all our different sources. And then, of course, we have very deep expertise in working with data. Our professionals have worked in the industries we served and then come onto the team and work with our customers. So we connect the dots between billions of public records and transactions, resulting in actionable information for our customers to advance their goals. Just a quick insight again to that vast data store and some of the categories of information. Again, there's over 13,000 sources, so there's multiple sources in these different bullets which we're showing. But you can see here from property records to 19.8 billion consumer records. We cover over 98% of the U.S. adult population. We have different solutions that can help even with those individuals that are not showing up on credit bureaus, let's say. Insurance records, we have the deepest data store of unique consumer names and addresses, over 51 different LexIDs for 51 million, for businesses. So some insights into the deep data store of LexisNexis. So as a company, Lexis is known as that data aggregator. But when we take that data and provide it to our customers, it provides a lot of value in any kind of research, due diligence, which they need to conduct. As far as recent news goes, our data store was used as one of the sources when they were researching and trying to find the Golden State Killer. If you saw it in the news, they did that based off of the DNA testing, and they took that DNA all the way back to, I believe it was the great-grandparent level, And then they started researching the spider of the family as it grew, and they were using our solution and, of course, some other solutions, but we were cited as one of the solutions they were using in that research. So, very cool to be able to help with that and have the data that's useful to our customers. And real quick, we're going to move on to a poll question, and then we'll get talking about Camilla will start talking about our WorldCompliance data and how we can instantaneously provide you with access to identification of risk within your searches.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, for our first question, we want to know, how difficult is it for you to identify a risk on domestic and international entities? Is it not very difficult, somewhat difficult, very difficult, or not applicable? Again, how difficult is it for you to identify risk on domestic and international entities?
Thanks, Kelsey, and thanks, Dan. And good afternoon, everyone. This is Camilla Yellett. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are in the world today. So we're just waiting for these responses to go in. Like Dan said, we're going to move on to talking about our WorldCompliance data, which is our open source data, and certainly looking at some of these responses, certainly going to be able to help you with that identification of risk, both on your domestic and international parties.
Yeah, so Camilla, it looks like right now, it looks like about 4% are saying it's not very difficult. We have about a little over 50% saying somewhat difficult, around 20% saying very difficult, and then 24% saying not applicable.
Great, thanks.
And so
Kelsey.
what do these results mean to you, Camilla?
Yeah, so this is a good spread. This is some interesting results here. Certainly for those in the not very difficult, hopefully you are familiar with some of the LexisNexis solutions. But certainly what we're looking at here, being able to really identify that risk, it's being able to not only identify that risk, but also make it clear to you what that risk is. And hopefully these next couple of slides that we're going to talk through here are really going to help you, certainly for those in the somewhat difficult and very difficult category, hopefully help you identify that risk, as well as make it clear what that risk is. Okay, so thanks everyone for answering. I'm going to move on here and talk about our WorldCompliance data, and as well as the research process that's involved in collecting that data. So when we talk about WorldCompliance and about our database, we're really here going to explain it to you. It's really it's over now 3 million detailed profiles from throughout the world. The database content is updated continuously. So approximately 2,000 profiles are manually created on a daily basis, and as well as around 3,000 updates to those existing profiles also completed on a daily basis. This allows for that really quick detection on individuals and organizations, and being able to link it to over 55 risk categories and subcategories. And we're going to talk a little bit about those categories in a couple of slides here. But again, being able to help make it clear to you what that risk is that's being presented to you. So this data is obtained exclusively from open sources of information, and we provide references to each of those original sources of information within each of those profiles that we create. The research group the researchers behind the WorldCompliance Operations Group consists of over 500 individual researchers who have fluencies in many of the major languages. We'll talk a little bit about languages in our next slide, but the WorldCompliance proprietary, its automated monitoring and detection systems, combined with this very strategically placed distribution of our researchers within these research centers, provide that for that continuous awareness of those relevant risk events for our customers. And those researchers are really geographically located to understand those local markets, politics, languages, and scripts. So it's really about embedding within those local cultures and using that local knowledge. And we talked about languages. Currently, just over 35,000 sources are monitored with speakers or researchers within 57 native languages. And those researchers, they really are the key to the WorldCompliance database. They use a variety of tools that are suitable for the geographies and their responsibilities to really routinely monitor those additional media sources, conduct those concept-based monitorings, and perform all of that lateral research as well. And most importantly, those researchers monitor over 9,000 government agency websites, those enforcement agency websites, and obviously, of course, sanctioning body websites for updates. And this allows for us to be ensuring that we're constantly updating our profiles with those time-sensitive changes within your risk profile or to that risk landscape. Okay, so we talked a little bit earlier about category coverage, so I really want to sort of break this down here, get a little bit more granular. When we're talking about WorldCompliance data, we put that data into these 6 main groups or these categories. Global sanctions and enforcement lists, so we aggregate over 1,500 global sanctions and enforcement lists, obviously including things like OFAC, EU, UN. And those sanctions watch lists, they're going to be the most high-profile segment of our data and really most high-profile for many of our clients. So we have over 100 distinct sanction sources in our coverage. And as we can see here, not only those sort of top-known lists like OFAC, United Nations or Her Majesty's Treasury, but also those bodies in Asia, LATAM, and the Middle East. And we're very careful to distinguish the data that comes from some of those official sanction sources from the data that we've identified through open source research, excuse me. Our enforcement categories and lists, you can see being pulled from court filings domestically and worldwide. You can see some of those examples there, FBI, Securities and Exchange Commission, and others. And it's really including, the goal there is to really identify those industry regulators, law enforcement agencies, central banks, and state attorney offices. And those sort of areas under our enforcement category are going to cover things like disqualified directors, penalized brokers, unauthorized banks, and obviously, probably most importantly, most wanted lists from the police forces across the globe. Politically exposed persons, we include that group and obviously also include their family members and close associates. And that really allows you to get that 360-degree view on that individual to be able to really understand the risk presented to you by PEPs, who in and themselves may not be something that would cause concern from the fact that they have access to those government funds and therefore are open to more bribery and corruption related activities. Adverse media, both domestic and global, over 35,000 sources are monitored. We compile those profiles on people and companies linked to, illicit activities such as financial crime, terrorism, human trafficking, and with enforcement as well, over 50 adverse media subcategories in total. And then lastly, the registrations data. Here we're really looking at things that it may help you just be informative in regards to your reviews, identifying that risk, or those investigations. So looking at information related to medicinal and recreational marijuana business filings, FinCEN-registered money service businesses, those companies truly registered with FinCEN doing that $1,000 per day per person on a continuous basis. So the category coverage, really when those profiles are created, they're added into one of those categories. And as we just mentioned, where possible, we add that subcategory designation as well. So this, again, goes back to being able to help you identify that risk, be clear on what that risk is, so that you can really understand what's being presented to you. And here's just some examples, obviously not all-inclusive, but giving you some insight into how those profiles are created and what types of subcategories we're looking at. Okay, so last slide before the next polling question, and really to lend some validity and credibility towards this profile creation, let's talk about how we locate, gather, and convert, most importantly, unstructured data into these structured profiles. So we've developed our own tools that monitor these various channels that we're collecting this risk-related information from. We have a combination of crawlers and scrapers that identify that potentially relevant news article or alerts covering, for example, PEP changes or any type of enforcement actions. And once identified, those items are sent to an analysis queue for a researcher to review. The researchers then go through a selection process to determine if the article or this alert or this individual that's been identified meets our inclusion criteria. And that's important because we want to make sure that we're giving you profiles relevant to your roles and your responsibilities, to your research, your investigations, and that this is not going to include, for example, my speeding ticket that I might have got a couple of years ago. So when an entity is identified as meeting that inclusion criteria, the researcher conducts that open source research to check whether it merits coverage under any of the other categories, as well as to gather, and most importantly, all of that additional information around that entity. Things like name variations, identifiers, dates of birth, for example, additional addresses, and of course those relationships as well, being able to give you those family, person, and other business relationships. So once that's complete, the researcher enters that information into the WorldCompliance database and within line with defined standards and guidelines. So it's consistent for every profile creation. And really, we'll talk a little bit more about that. That system that we utilize, it contains hundreds of business rules really to ensure that data integrity, consistency, which we just said, and obviously completeness as well. And then there's field-level change tracking, and this enables oversight into what we did and who did it and when it was done as well. And then, of course, that's not the end of the cycle, right? This information isn't static. This can change on a daily basis, if not quicker. So profiles are refreshed as and when they hit one of those analysis queues again. So we're constantly using that combination of automated and manual reviews to be able to ensure that you're getting the most up-to-date and accurate data. And knowing as well, talking a little bit about that quality control there, being able to provide that audit profile or that audit stream as well to ensure that all of those profiles are going through the correct generation and updation schedule.
Hey, Camilla, I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is Dan. I'm seeing a lot of messages about audio quality. I'm hearing you just fine, but there seems to be something with the phone lines. Kelsey, is that something that you can troubleshoot?
Actually, the phone lines are working just fine. I would just recommend to everyone, if you are experiencing issues, go ahead and join with the Flash version. It's located on the Settings tab on the left side of your screen. That might resolve that issue for you. Please go ahead.
Okay, sorry, Camilla.
No, appreciate that, Dan. I'm happy to slow down here for a minute. And do know that we're recording this, so you'll be able to obviously hear this again as well afterwards. But yeah, apologies for that, the audio quality there. Hopefully, using Kelsey's steps there to join with the Flash version, hopefully that will help. But Kelsey, why don't we move on to our next poll question?
Yeah, absolutely, Camilla. So, ladies and gentlemen, please tell us what resources you are currently using for your initial investigation. Are you using internet, internal resources, commercially available databases, or boots-on-the-street researchers? I'll pause a moment to get those results.
Great. Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, and hopefully here we're going to the next stage. You're going to hear me, unfortunately, for a couple more minutes, but then I will pass back over to Dan. But we're going to talk a little bit in the sort of really the last half how we can provide you access to the WorldCompliance data. So this is going to help us understand what you're currently doing and what for your investigations.
Yeah, so Camilla, those results are in. So it looks like an overwhelming 90% majority use the internet. We have 45% coming in with internal resources, 85% coming in with commercially available databases, and then we have 50% with boots-on-the-street researches. So I'll turn it back to you for your thoughts on those, Camilla.
Yeah, great. And Dan, I'd certainly ask you to jump in with an opinion too. But this doesn't surprise me. I think this is very in line with what we see within our fields of AML, financial crime compliance, anti-bribery, corruption as well. Obviously a great source of information, internet, commercially available databases. But I think with the WorldCompliance data, and hopefully this was made clear as well, is that sometimes that internet, that is your unstructured results, that unstructured information, and we're taking that and creating those structured profiles. And I think that helps really from an efficiency perspective to be operationally more efficient as you're going through those reviews, either for yourselves or third parties.
Yeah, and Camilla, I would say the same thing, that the pre-created, pre-structured risk profile saving you from those internet searches. Type in John McCain and see McCain Fishing Shop in Minneapolis and have to filter past that. That team's already done that for you. And then, of course, the boots-on-the-street researchers, which is definitely a capability we have as well. But that's that comes at a cost. You're putting a live body out on the street. And so being able to access a database that is designed strictly around risk and identification of that can certainly be a time and resource saver.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Dan. Okay, well, thanks, everyone, for answering. I'm going to move on. Just a couple more slides from me. Here we talked, so far we've talked about what Lexis does. We've talked about the WorldCompliance data. And now we're going to show you how we can give you access to that data, to that very structured, managed, owned data to help you identify that risk. So we're going to talk about two solutions. I'm going to open up on the online search tool, pass over to Dan. He's going to go through a great example for you, really making it relevant to today's world. And then he's going to finish up by talking through our Bridger Insight XG platform as well. So first up, let's talk about the online search tool. So the online search tool really, it does what it says it does. It is a manual key-in entry sort of web-based platform. Utilizes that Boolean search logic. It's the ability, kind of like entering in Google, right? You put in the name and it returns those results. Here, you're going to put in that name and you're going to get those structured profiles come back. So you can utilize single names, business names. With those names, especially remember the usual rules apply, right? You want to, if you have a common name, utilize a date of birth if you have that handy for you. but also being able to give you the ability to look up keywords and giving you that option again in that web-based manual key and entry platform. So here, just giving you a quick example, this would be results from when you just enter that single name. Let's pretend we put in Matthew James Brown as our single name entry, and it's going to return the results to you. This is an example of what that summary screen is going to look like. It's going to provide you on the first column there, you can see in order those matches based upon the percentage associated with that match generation. So these are all 100%, so they're roughly sort of all tied for first here. But 100%, that M column is going to give you that match, the probability of that match. Obviously then the names of the records or the profiles given to you next. The associated country that we've found those profiles under, and then position. This is really your category explanation, so the single liner here, giving you that quick insight into saying what and who this profile is on. And you can see here in this example under the column class, this is really giving you that category. So these have all been identified as potential PEPs. And you can see from the position just giving you that quick insight into the fact that, yes, they are a PEP. So as I'm going through these summary results, I have the last 4 columns on the right-hand side. So here we've got ID. This column, if there is the ID icon in there, it means that we've added additional identifiers. This could be something like a date of birth, additional addresses. That's really helpful additional information to be able to help you discern if you have a true match to somebody that you are looking for, or looking at, I should say. Obviously, if there's a camera icon within the picture column, then we've provided a picture for you on that profile. You can actually click into that picture and it will take you to the source that was utilized to actually add that picture to that profile. So it could come from a news source such as, perhaps the Washington Post. It could come from, a government agency press release. It could come from anywhere. But it's really, again, validating the fact that we're utilizing the appropriate data to be able to support the creation of that profile. And then the last 2 columns, AKAs, obviously aliases, or also known as, where we can, we've provided those as well. And then the last column, that relationship column, giving you an icon to be able to delineate whether we've been able to identify any other additional relationships, whether that be family, individual associates, or business associates as well. So that's all from me. I'm going to pass over to Dan for your next slide.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Camilla. So now we've shown, one of the delivery methods for the WorldCompliance data. And I want to point out we did receive requests about PEP. I apologize for the acronym. So PEP, politically exposed person. So when you look at a political office holder, they're more susceptible to corruptibility than the common citizen. And so by the PEP programs, the USA Patriot Act, and other regulations across the globe, you need to be identified not only the office holder, but also their close associates and family members. Because if you think of John McCain, it's going to be hard for him to do anything in his name because everyone knows him. So he would use, I'm not saying he does, but I'm saying he would use a friend or family member to conduct illicit activities if he was involved in those. And so a full PEP database, very important in identifying those associations and family members. And we'll talk about that here in a second. I'm actually going to show a full example. So when we look at the slide that we're still on here, these different names are different profiles in our database. And if you click on them, they'll take you to the full profile. And that's what I'm going to show now. So because many investigators are investigating, especially for financial institutions amongst all your other clientele, I thought I'd use this example because it brings to bear the international banking system. And so reporter Daphne Garcia in Malta, she was using the Panama Papers and writing articles and exposing corruption in the government in Malta, as well as exposing organized crime in Malta. Unfortunately, after she started writing these articles, she was killed in a car bomb in October of 2017. And so just a little background on what we're going to be talking about here with this profile. So I went on to the online search tool and I searched the name Joseph Muscat. So as you're conducting your research, you were given this name, you need to go out and start conducting research. We put in Joseph Muscat, and we find that in WorldCompliance, we expose Joseph Muscat as a political office holder. He's a government branch member located in Malta, which is where he was born. We've given you his date of birth so you can differentiate your customer from, or your subject, I should say, from the one that's on the list. And we see that he's been Prime Minister since 2013. So really no risk there. Right now we know he's the Prime Minister. But then when our team starts researching Joseph Muscat, we start finding out that we have adverse media showing about Joseph Muscat. So it was implied in the articles from Ms. Garcia that he was not only selling passports to internationals, selling access to Maltese passports, but that he was also involved in the corruption involved in the Panama Papers and using the international banking system for money laundering, including his wife was implicated as using a Panama-based shell company to hide $1 million payment received from the daughter of the Azerbaijan president. And so we see that we're starting exposing, and this started coming to light after Ms. Garcia wrote the articles. And so here we see certainly some risk with his family, immediate family. But then as we flow through the different dates, we see up here that as of July of last year, the courts in Malta accepted the request to launch a full criminal investigation against Joseph Muscat. So he's not just a politically exposed person, he's somebody that might be involved in some kind of illicit activities and somebody that would be concerning and certainly garner more research. So again, the key to the WorldCompliance data is the researchers doing this research for you, providing you with succinct information about the subject and why there's risk, and quickly, near instantaneously, telling you that there's some kind of risk here. We've also pulled out other identifiable information about Joseph Muscat, again, beyond date of birth and his career information, to again help you differentiate, is my customer the one of concern? And then here we show the associations for Joseph Muscat. Certainly there's his family members. Now, his wife was implicated, but she's certainly not guilty, so she is not an enforcement record, and neither is he. Neither of them have been found guilty of anything yet, but we're showing leading information that something could be wrong here, and it would require additional research. We see also that he's associated to other individuals that have risk profiles in our database, certainly a PEP network, but we also have 2 individuals that themselves have adverse media, in this case, both of them for money laundering. So they have charges pending against them for money laundering schemes. And then I saw an article recently where Joseph Muscat may be associated, and our team is researching that right now per my request. He may be associated to an Iranian banker who lives and operates in New York and is currently designated by the U.S. government as he was providing banking services to Iranian entities, which of course is against the law. We see also all those sources that we used for that research. Again, accessing over 35,000 global media sources. If you go out, and this is the key to the structured data, if you go to Google right now and type in the name Bernie Madoff, I get 403,000 returns from Google. There's 403,000 different returns on Bernie Madoff. Our team have read through the articles, and they've created one profile for Bernie Madoff that tells you why he is in prison for 150 years, who he was associated to, and what businesses he was associated to that have risk profiles. And so that's the key, is that team going out and doing all of that research. And lastly, on the online tool, and certainly we'll be talking about the Bridger tool as well, the online tool that key in one-off searching, there's also a visualization of associations. And for those that are heavily involved in investigations, this is a feature that they seem to really, really like about this particular product. So here, I know it's a bit of an eye chart for you, but Joseph Muscat is the center of his universe, and then we see his associations to risk profiles contained within the WorldCompliance database. And so just by seeing more than a couple here, we know there's something wrong, and then we can start spidering out and clicking on and looking at the profiles for those other individuals and or businesses that he may be linked to. Pardon me. And so capabilities of the online search tool, we'll certainly be talking about your ability to automate your screening and your searching and risk identification, but we do have another poll question that we'd like to get to real quick.
Actually, Dan, if you'd like to just continue on, please.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I thought we had a poll question there. So the WorldCompliance data is also available in our Bridger Insight XG platform. Bridger is our flagship screening solution, the most widely used screening tool on the globe by 3 times any competitor out there. It's been in market since 1996, so it's the most selected tool for the screening function. There's many reasons for that, the technology, the algorithms, et cetera, and we'll talk briefly about that. When we look at the Bridger tool, there are many features that would help you in your investigations. So the Bridger tool stores and archives the alerts. As you're working on those cases, you have the ability to add notes. You have the ability to add attachments of many different formats. So that Google research that 90% said they're doing, or Google or Internet, I should say, you can attach that. HTML, images, documents, Excel spreadsheets, PDFs, text files, a wealth of different formats of data that you can attach to your record as you're moving it through your cases and through your research process. You can put decisions, and then you can push and pull alerts from one user to another or user to a user group as necessary. And then again, Bridger storing and archiving, so that audit trail, not only for you to prove the research you did, but also if your customer or someone else has audit questions, examination questions, everything's there. Who worked with this record? What date and time did they work with this record? What actions did they perform on it? All stored and archived. And then certainly reporting built into that tool as well. So taking the WorldCompliance online search tool, which certainly there's use cases for, but that is a single key in the name, see the response. It doesn't store, it doesn't archive that information, it doesn't give you the ability to put decisions. You would either print or export that particular record if it was germane to your case and then store it somewhere, versus the Bridger tool is allowing batching, web service API call, key in searches, and then providing the case management workflow, audit trails, and storage as required. When we look at the Bridger tool, the matching technology is truly world-class, some of the best in the industry, if not the best in the industry. And so it's proprietary to the tool, how we do our matching, but that's very important. You're going to have a lot of common names that come through, John Smith. So Bridger can match on name, address, phone number, date of birth, ID, all the way down to eye color. So the more data that you can provide in the Bridger, the better. And then we can use that with our matching technology and fuzzy logic to make sure things don't slip through the cracks, you don't miss risk, and then also to help you eliminate noise and false positives that you never needed to see in the first place. As I mentioned before, you can key in searches, you can batch through the user interface, you can automate batching to billions of records. We have one customer that ran 90 billion records in less than 60 days. And so the system can handle whatever volume you want to throw at it. And then, of course, the web services or APIs for system-to-system integration for that instantaneous result. And then custom list management, your ability to upload lists of your own. If you or your clients have, a deny list, a hot list, however you have it titled, those can be uploaded into the tool as well for that screening to tell you, John Doe may not be on OFAC or he may not have adverse media, but he's on our own internal list that says he defaulted on us before. Let's not do business with this guy. And then when we look at the Bridger Insight XG tool, WorldCompliance is certainly a component of Bridger available through the tool. We also have additional capabilities because, of course, when we started the call, we mentioned the deep data store Lexis has. We have many different solutions based around that data, and we can integrate some of those into Bridger to turn your screening tool into a compliance suite. So identity verification for individuals and businesses. Is this Dan Phelan? Does this last name match the first name? Does the address match to this name? Does a phone number, does a social security number, date of birth, driver's license, etc.? Some fraud risk tools, news and negative news, that global media resources. All the time I'll have sales reps send me an article and say, hey, Dan, look at this article. But if it's like on the Wall Street Journal, I don't have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, so I can't access the article. Well, we're accessing over 30,000 media sources, 35,000, that our team are using for the adverse media, but you can conduct additional research on our tool as well. And then that public and commercial records data store, the 6 petabytes of information that you can access through our data store. And again, these can all be coupled with Bridger. So really you have one suite for your research, one suite of products for your research that's then storing and archiving all of the reports and information